Hi guys, today is quite a serious topic. It's around spiritual psychosis and something I've obviously heard about, but something I didn't really understand what it was until my very recent experience where it was confirmed to me someone who I had met on a conscious dating site indeed had spiritual psychosis. But to give you a little bit of background and a little bit of context as to why I believe this to be, I want to read something to you that he wrote in a forum whilst trying to recruit people into what my friend at the time called a cult. Something at the time I didn't believe. But anyway, I will read this. And for sake of his own privacy, I'm not going to reveal the name that he called himself by, even though it wasn't his real name. Again, all will come to fruition. And I also just want to add, this isn't me calling him out. I actually feel very sad that people are going through this because people are experiencing psychosis, whether it be spiritual or whether it just be psychosis, because they struggle to be in the real world. So it's a very serious problem. Anyway, without further ado, hi everyone. I've recently joined the forums to meet with other members of my soul family. I'm part of an international group of alchemists who are here to weather the darkness that approaches and help usher in the coming golden age, aka heaven on earth. That's how we met. So I saw his profile on a dating website, but I didn't write to him because he lived in China. So I didn't see the point. And of course, I wanted to meet someone. Anyway, long story short, he'd obviously seen that I looked at his profile and he wrote to me. And he gave me this kind of spiel. And at the time, I was studying the occult and I was looking to start getting into magic. So what he was saying really resonated with me. My archetype is that of the Hierophant, and I've been gifted the visions of what's to come. Again, he told me that he was having visions of a spiritual nature. And again, at the time, I believed that he was gifted. I believed he was having these visions. I'm going to talk more on that in a moment. But after we'd met on the dating website and we'd had a couple of emails back and forth, we actually spoke on Telegram. And we spoke on Telegram for a long time. And I really resonated with everything that he had to say. But anyway, let me continue with what he said. I will hereby share some of the things I've seen. You can do whatever you like with this information. I'm posting it here for the few that are ready to hear it, and don't mind the 100 that will mock and call me names. I've been called everything from insane, fed, LARP to faggot, and much more. And much worse, sorry. I am used to it. In fact, I see it as a badge of honour. So it appears that this place is a holographic simulation. The source is here to experience all things and does this through the illusion of separation into individual people, animals, plants, minerals, and spirits. Now, I do have a belief that this is a simulation. How that simulation actually looks, I don't know. And again, there's all kinds of variations of simulation. It's also been spoken about within the science community about this being a holographic simulation, the quantum science. So again, this to me isn't a far out thing for him to say. And he told me that's what he believed when we met. And I was at that point as well. I'd followed a guy called Jason Brashears from Archaics, who'd been talking about all these things and talking about the Phoenix event in 2040. So again, what he says in this email or this message on this forum, I was on board with. So at this point, there are no red flags. The totality of the soul is the computer. Whatever it dreams of is where the processing power goes, and reality is thus generated. Obvious proof of this are the so-called Mandela effects, where seemingly physical and constant things change all the time without any logical explanation. And again, I've done research on the Mandela effect. I myself have experienced paranormal experiences where things have come into my timeline and disappeared from my timeline. So again, this isn't a shocker to me, and I wouldn't have red flags around this. There appears to be natural laws and rhythms to the simulation that repeats over and over like a somatic fractal, expanding and contracting. Some of these are preserved in what is known as the Hermetic Principles. I've read the Hermetic Principles. They are an ancient philosophies by a chap called Hermes Trismegistus and very well known in occult circles. Nothing again there screams red flag. Inside the simulation, humanity goes through cycles, from a golden age of perfection, over time corrupting into an iron age of darkness. The Vedic teachings refer to this as a Satya and Kali Yuga. Again, no red flags there for me. At present, we are fast approaching the end of the Iron Age, but things will get much worse before we can make it through. Again, no red flags. Humanity is currently splitting into two. The majority are here to experience endless suffering and darkness and will get their money's worth. A smaller section are on the opposite path. They have already experienced much darkness and learned the valuable lessons. They have burnt off enough of their negative karma and are now ready to ascend, becoming the seed of the change to come. Now, that is around the idea of reincarnation. Past lives, we learn things in our previous lives and then we get reincarnated. Again, it's the Buddha philosophy of we come here for karmic lessons, basically. This seems to be a process of purification of the mind, body and soul, i.e. alchemy. And again, Carl Jung talks about alchemy. So again, no red flags. As they purify, they will start to regain their divine powers, magic and miracles. Some of these are telepathy, levitation, telekinesis, instant healing, shape-shifting, elemental magic, etc., each according to their gifts. It is a metamorphosis of sorts that will create a chosen butterfly or saint class. Again, I believe that we came here to this realm with those gifts, and I also believe that we are going back to that. And that is in line with the stuff that I've talked about regarding the age of Aquarius, the chaos that we appear to be going through now, the dark and the light, etc., etc. So again, no red flags there for me. The shadow system will tell the normies that these chosen ones are aliens here to invade the earth. Think a modern day witch hunt. That is why this narrative is currently being prepared. And again, we are being told about aliens, and if you don't know about it already, have a look at something called Project Bluebeam, which is, we will see a vision in the sky, and again, we will be manipulated, brainwashed, however that looks. This is a simple filter by which source will decide who gets to make it to the next part. Anyone who witnesses a miracle firsthand but thinks it's some technological or alien event has become overinvested in the third physical dimension, the devil, and forgotten about source. Now, again, this is, I've never read the Bible, but I understand this is written in the Bible. The 144,000. So, again, like I said, I've never read the Bible. I'm not a religious person. I also saw that this is holographic in nature. So as we progress, we regress. And again, I've done an interview with somebody called Neil Bentley. I'll pop the link in the top here. And it's around the dog star, the Sirius star. And the further it is away from humanity, the more unconscious humanity are. And as it gets closer and closer to Earth, the more enlightened, the more awakened humanity become. And we are currently in the process of Sirius, Nibiru, whatever, what you want to call it, the dog star getting closer to Earth. So that could be, that could correspond with the awakening that appears to be occurring at these times. So as things go on, it will start to get increasingly biblical, i.e. the end times. Ailments such as sudden blindness, leprosy and plagues are all making a comeback. I saw the cricket farms they are opening around the world will be unleashed at the same time to create the plague of locusts. It will get very bad indeed. There will be a third world war where much of the remaining common sense knowledge will be further lost and humanity will hit a rock bottom of demoralization. Again, we can kind of see that narrative playing out, or at least being talked about within the narratives of mainstream media. At that point, there will emerge a figure who pretends to be a saviour. I won't write his name here as it feeds him energetically, but I'll just say he's a famous public figure known for running an electric car company. This person will suggest everyone takes his mark of the beast, a brain chip implant. Once enough have done so, it will be activated, and what follows is basically a zombie apocalypse. They will be living in pods connected to a virtual version of reality and fed synthetic liquids. The sky will also be burnt out to stop any sunlight reaching the surface, i.e. the Matrix. And again, you know, if you are within conspiracy fields, if you've watched programs like Black Mirror and other dystopian films, you can see that actually. And I'm now of the opinion, I don't know if I believe or if I disbelieve, because if they put it out to the public, is it a distraction for something else? Or is it predictive programming? I don't know. I'm at that stage in my journey where I don't necessarily believe or disbelieve anything. I just think what is. So on a soul level, these people will be at such a low point, they'll be begging to be purified in the fire. That's when the saints and angels will come down from the crystal castles in the sky, calling down all kinds of natural disasters and destruction to cleanse everything on the surface. Once these souls are free to return to source, the projection will shift to a heaven on earth version of reality. There will be a unity consciousness and no need for fear, greed or hate. People will be immortal and stay at an optimum level of health. The realm will be rebuilt with beauty as a priority, and each second will feel like an eternity of bliss, joy and pleasure, to be enjoyed by those who are pure enough to make it through the gate. Now again, if you look back in antiquity and look at, say, Rudolf Steiner's work and Edgar Cayce's work, they talk about a place called Lemuria, which was heaven on earth, and that was our first incarnation here on this earth as souls. You know, we were closer to the soul. We were translucent beings. The women were magical beings. The men were the protectors. They were. I'm going to get onto the whole divine masculine and feminine crap in a moment. You know, but they could manifest things from pure thought alone. And this is actually where my thoughts around the role of AI are beginning to come in, and how when we think about something, it's manifested through the technology. But again, I've talked about that in other videos. And again, it's just a theory. I don't know if it's concrete truth. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I feel they're genuine. I'm quite good at perceiving energy and can see through people's bullshit. Also, feel free to DM me if this resonates and you believe this is what you came here to do. And that is where our relationship began. Not from this message in this forum. It was from a personal message that he'd sent to me on this dating site that I resonated with. And then when we got on Telegram and we spoke for 1 hour and 11 seconds, and anybody that's into their angel numbers will understand what I mean by that. It all just seemed like divine timing. But yes, I'm going to be going into more of the experience further on in this video. So, welcome back. I have made notes regarding this because there's a lot to unpack regarding this experience, and I've done it in 2 separate parts, hence why there is a wardrobe change and I've cut my fringe. And anyway, so on our very first conversation on the phone, or on Telegram rather, he was telling me all this stuff, and I was telling him about my own personal paranormal experiences. And I told him about the Phoenix, of my connection to the Phoenix. So we talked about Jason's work of Archaics, and again, he was obviously on that trajectory as well, regarding what was to come. And he told me that he was the incarnation of a chap. And I'm not going to say the chap's name, but who this chap is again from someone from antiquity. So, said chap is a mythical figure of the alchemical tradition, often associated with the idea of a future perfect adept who could achieve feats like transmuting metals, which were not possible for current human endeavours. Paracelsus believed that said figure would reveal occult arts, and that the future would bring a messianic, I think it's called messianic, pronounced messianic era with realizations of alchemical dreams. The myth of has been traced from its origin to the present time, where it has been used to fulfill various functions, including giving voice to an expectation and nostalgia for forgotten knowledge, and serving as a means of legitimizing esoteric programs. This figure is best known within alchemy, Rosicrucianism, and Neo-Rosicrucianism, and is a product of modernity. So again, I didn't see any red flags because of my own personal experience and my own personal belief systems and my own personal views around the occult and the experiences that people have within the occult with spirits. I believed it was completely possible. And as the conversation progressed, and I told him about this painting that I painted as a child, and which I now believe was the Phoenix. So when he said to me, "You might be the incarnation of the Phoenix," it didn't seem so far out there, because I'll give you a little bit of background as to why to me that didn't seem so far out there. As a 6-year-old, I had a very, very vivid dream. And it was a dream of all these colours. Now, this little black being stood in the middle of all these colours. And at the time, I described it as a big monster. But I was so in awe of this dream that when I woke up from it, I went and sat back on the landing to try and get this dream back. And at the time of painting this, I don't know how old I was. I didn't think anything of it. It was an art class at school. I didn't think anything of it. And just to prove to you that was my wall, that's me as a teenager being all sexy. Now it's changed in my posing. And you'll see there RoboCop. So if you go and watch my video regarding an AI companion, I fancied RoboCop when I was a kid. So now new there, nothing's changed regards me. But anyway, back to, when I did a mushroom ceremony, before I actually did the mushroom ceremony, I was talking to a chap on Telegram, and we were discussing all kinds of esoteric stuff, the occult, etc., etc. And he sent me a painting, which I'm going to pop in here. He sent me a painting of an ancient painting of the Phoenix. At the time, we were talking about the Phoenix event. And I went, oh my God, I painted that. And I went and showed him that. And I hope, I'll put it on this side. The I don't know if you can see too clearly there, but it pretty much is a perfect depiction of the painting that he sent me. So from a spiritual, synchronistic, divine perspective, I have an association with the phoenix. I am Scorpio. Scorpios go through three stages of evolution. You've got your scorpion, you've got your eagle, and then you've got your phoenix. So when he said this to me, it didn't seem that far-fetched because, hey, he was gifted and he was seeing visions. So what did little old me know, who was only just starting to go into the realm of the potentiality of working with spirits? So yes, didn't seem that far out. And we talked on the regular. He asked me if I was doing the great work. And the great work is a magnum opus in Latin, is a term used in alchemy and hermeticism to describe the spiritual and transformative process aimed at achieving enlightenment or self-transcendence. It is symbolized by the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, representing the culmination of the spiritual path and the integration of unconscious complexes into conscious awareness. In alchemy, the great work involves a series of stages, often depicted through symbolic colours and imagery. And it is not just a physical process, but also a metaphor for personal and spiritual transformation. Well, I was already on the path of doing the great work, looking into the occult, looking to work with spirits. I truly believe that my only personal Damien has connected with me many times, and I believe that the path that I'm on and have been on has been a guide from my own personal daemon. So when he said to me, you could be the incarnation of the phoenix, it was plausible because anything's possible in the metaphysical, anything is a potentiality and nothing would surprise me these days. So among all of this, he told me he was the incarnation of this chap. And then as we continue to talk, he was then the incarnation of Jesus and the incarnation of, I can't pronounce it. There's another word for the Buddha, Bodhidharma. I've written it down somewhere and I'll find it when I come across it. And then I remember once we had a conversation about the demiurge, and next thing he's writing to me saying, oh my God, I've just had a vision from the demiurge. And he had all these messages from spirit for me and, to be more feminine. This was a little bit further down the line after we took things a little bit further, but I will talk about that. We're not there yet. So anyway, he told me that he'd met this girl who he believed to be the incarnation of Hecate. And he'd had a vision that me and this girl would come together when the time was right and we would cleanse this realm. So I asked, when am I going to meet this girl? Now, bearing in mind, he had this alchemical, what did he call it? International group of alchemists, which is what he had sold all this to me, but I had to do the great work before I would be invited into this group of alchemists. So I wasn't ready yet, basically. Because I'll be honest, the first time I spoke to him, I was all giddy, I was excited, because I found the guy attractive, right? Otherwise I wouldn't have looked at his profile on the dating site. There you go. So the first time we spoke, I was very high energy. I am very high energy anyway. And he was like, just breathe, just calm down to breathe. And he had a very calming effect on me. So he was good for me in many respects. So anyway, he told me about this incarnation of Hecate, and I then wondered when I was going to be invited into this international group of alchemists. He believed he was the one to initiate people. And again, I'm going to be like going back and forth here. Further on down the line of our conversation. Obviously, we'd opened up quite a bit. We were having one-on-one conversations, actually speaking. It wasn't just all written. So he'd opened up to me and I'd opened up to him. And he sent me something from this forum. Now, bear in mind, at this time, I didn't know he was on this forum. And he'd sent me something that he'd said in this forum. Well, I went and joined this forum because I can be a little bit sneaky. I went and joined this forum, and this is where I got this information from. So he was basically, he was obviously on the conscious dating site to recruit people. And I want to add in here, he truly believed this. I don't think he's being nasty. I truly believe he believes this. So anyway, it's up to the interpreter to interpret if he was being manipulative or whatever. And again, I'll get to all that in a bit. So he'd said something, he'd seen a comment from someone, and he basically said, this person, you're ready to be initiated. And he'd written, I'm happy to... So somebody had said, if you've got all this knowledge, why don't you share it into this public forum? Because, of course, people are sceptical, unlike me, who's maybe a little bit gullible. But again, it just highlights my desire to want connection in a world where there literally is no connection. So anyway, so he said, I'm happy to share my knowledge on here with all my brothers and sisters. I am, however, unable to initiate someone into a public forum, in a public forum. I've been using Telegram for ease of access, but we will eventually have our own private app. So, yeah, I kind of gone into that forum to find out a little bit more about him because red flags had started to emerge by this point. Anyway, our friendship grew and we spoke more and more on Telegram. He had opened up to me about how he got where he was, i.e. at the Kung Fu school in China. And guess what? It happened in 2020 where there was a massive upheaval with people's consciousness. Some people went one way and other people went another way, and you'll know yourself which way you chose. But basically, he had what he termed, and it is an actual thing, as a walking soul experience, where the soul he was born with left and a new soul came to reveal this enlightenment of what I'm talking about now. So much so that he ended up in a psych ward. His family, he was married at the time, and he'd woke up from this event and he tried to eat his wedding ring because he believed that gold was a healer. And again, none of these at this point are red flags for me. Not even the fact that he's been in a psych ward, because I understand that we have been lied to about pretty much everything about healing, about what's considered toxic, what's considered healthy. I don't believe, if it's in the mainstream narrative, and in actual fact, if it's in the conspiracy narrative, I tend not to believe it these days. But then that's another conversation for another time. So again, what he's saying to me at this point aren't red flags for me. Even the fact that he told me he'd been in a psych ward, because I believe that people who've got schizophrenia can see beyond the veil. I believe they are gifted, and that's why they are drugged up. That is why they end up in mental institutions, because they can't deal with what they're experiencing. One of my neighbours is a schizophrenic, and he talks to himself, and, he went past me once and, did that kind of thing. And, but that's okay. I know he's mentally ill and he's on medication. And he functions, but I'll tell you something, he's actually really, really clever, and he's so strong, and he works so hard. So I believe that these people who are shoved in mental institutions are gifted. One could say it's been depicted in Stranger Things with the young girl, you know, experimentations on these people. The CIA have actually, there's documentation from the CIA around all of this. So again, no red flags. So I can't remember whether it was Jesus or Bodhidharma as to the soul that had entered his body, or the name that he went by. I can't remember the specifics on that. But this is how he found himself at the China, the Kung Fu school in China. He'd been led there. And again, I fully understand our soul path and why we may end up where we end up, you know. And he'd gone there to alchemically transform himself so he could be the man he believed he had incarnated to be. We did get jazzy with it. Yeah, we'd opened up about sex and fantasies and bisexual tendencies. We'd opened up about all of that. And I've been in relationships where we have talked about things like, I don't know, swinging clubs. And me and my best friend, we once talked about, should we go to a swinging club? And, you know, quite open-minded, quite liberal in my thinking. And I'll get to that in a minute. Bisexuality, I truly believe we all have bisexual tendencies. Whether we act on those bisexual tendencies is one of preference, but, you know, and I believe as a soul, as a spirit, we are neither male nor female. So again, what we were talking about wasn't a red flag scenario for me. It's things that I've talked about with friends. It's things that I've talked about with partners. You know, how do we keep something alive when you're in a relationship? All these things. Now, he'd looked into antiquity, and there was, I've never looked into it, so I can't speak about it with any authority, but Abrahamic times, it was very fluid, shall we say, you know. Women were viewed in a certain way, men were viewed in a certain way. And again, I guess that's being seeped into at the moment regarding the masculine and the feminine, and the divine masculine, divine feminine. Again, I'm going to touch on that later on in this video, and how actually it's really toxic. But in Abrahamic times, things were very different. They all lived in communities and they were all basically fucking one another, right? Now, he was telling me this is how he believed people should be living. And I understood it. I made clear, just because I understand something doesn't mean to say that I agree with it, but I understood it. And because he'd met a woman that kind of understood what he was saying, you know, quite taboo subjects. Some of them were way too taboo for me, but still, you know, I tried to understand where he was coming from based on the research that he had done. I was open-minded about it all. Anyway, there was one particular night we were having a conversation and I was quite highly strung. I can't remember what happened in the day. And one thing led to another. And yeah, there was a moment, shall we say. And I felt a really deep connection. And I was already beginning to really like this guy. Even though there were no illusions, he told me about what he felt was our future regards humanity, you know, living in communities, sleeping with both men and women, you know, everything really fluid and coming from a place of love. And he was also non-monogamous? And again, I was okay with that. Listen, the guy lived in China. I kind of figured that it wasn't going to go anywhere anyway, but again, it did. Anyway, so one thing led to another and we had a moment and it made me feel good. I felt good. And I became into this guy and he became into me. But I'm a woman and I wanted to talk about feelings for a lot of it. And it got to the point where every single time we were getting on the phone or Telegram, he was wanting to lead it to sex. And I didn't want that. What had happened, and I didn't want to take it much further. That was like, I was happy with that. And this one particular time, and he'd always start off the conversation with, I need your help with something. So there was that level of manipulation, but it openly admitted he was manipulative, but he didn't see manipulation as a negative trait. He saw it as one of his superpowers. So there was this one particular night, I had a really bad day and he wanted to speak to me. So, you know, I spoke with him and I was telling him about the day that I'd had, and he went, I know what will make you feel better. And I was like, nah, I'm really not up for that. Not tonight. And he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And he got very predatory and he got very crude. And I didn't like how crude he got. And he told me that he'd been talking to this 18-year-old who wanted to have a threesome with me and him. And would I be up for it? And I said, no. I said, I'm really not in the mood. And I said, just because I've opened up about certain things with you doesn't mean to say I'm ready to take that next step. Absolutely not. And as I said, he got very forceful and he sent me a picture of a young girl. She was only about 18 straight away. And he knew that would trigger me because he said, I know her age is going to trigger you. But he still went ahead and do it anyway. And I was disgusted. I was revolted. And, you know, I'm not a prude, right? But he overstepped the mark. He pushed boundaries and he went past my boundaries. And I spoke to him about it a couple of days later and he apologised. And then we got on the phone again sometime later. And again, he tried to push towards getting off, basically, because it wasn't sex, it was getting off, basically. And I said, no. By this point, I was starting to really back away. And by this point, I was beginning to think there was a bit of delusion going on here, because we'd had a conversation about the demiurge. And he messaged me pretty much straight after this conversation saying, oh my God, I've just had a message from the demiurge. I think I'm an incarnation of the demiurge. It's like, for fuck's sake, how far is this going to go? And he told me that he'd had messages from spirit about I don't love myself and I need to be more feminine and dress more like a woman and be more sexual. And again, it was all for his favour, absolutely, you know. And I said to him, why are the spirits even bothered about? Because by this time, I was starting to, after that situation where he crossed the boundaries of how far I wanted to take things, I've been completely turned off by this point, and I no longer found him attractive. And I was starting to see the delusion and starting to just like really back away. And there was this one time we were having a conversation. This might have been before the event. I can't remember timelines. But we were having a conversation about reptilians, the Illuminati, and the Jews and the chosen ones. Now, there are a group of Jewish people who believe that they are chosen ones. And again, I've got a completely different perception around the Illuminati, around the reptilians, and around the chosen ones these days, you know, the Jewish. I don't believe everything's as nefarious as I once believed it to be. I believe that, you know, there's good and evil in this realm. There's a dark and the light. And I think there is a battle. I do believe there is a spiritual battle happening. But he sent me this photograph after he declared that he believed he was a Jewish chosen one. And he was beginning to now think that I wasn't one of the chosen ones because I wasn't doing the great work, probably because I wasn't as forthcoming as he wanted me to be regarding getting frisky. So he sent me this photograph, and he was made up like a Jewish person. Now, I grew up with a Jewish man, so I'm well aware of the way the Jewish present themselves. My stepdad was Jewish. He wasn't Orthodox, but he still went to, like, you know, some of the Jewish festivals where he wore that little thing on his head. I'm not sure what it's called. But it sent me this photograph of him with like this Jewish beard. And he had this long blonde hair. Now, the guy's got a shaved head, and he also was dark-haired, and in this photograph, his hair was blonde. Now, again, by this point, I was starting to think, something's not quite right here. So I said, well, your hair's blonde in that photograph. And he went, yeah, it's been bleached by the sun. So anyway, because my suspicion had started to rise by this point, I started trying to find out how much you could do with AI. You know, how real could you make a manipulation on one of your own photographs be real? I couldn't find anything, so I have no idea if he actually looked like this before he went to China or if he didn't. So I don't know. But what the real kicker for me was regarding how I came to the conclusion that he was delusional. All these visions he claimed to be having was because he was taking psychedelics. As soon as he told me that, I was like, oh man, I've been taking a fucking old jolly here. So something had happened. I sent him something around spiritual psychosis as it happens, because again, as I said, I was already starting to get a bit fishy about this. So I'd sent him something about spiritual psychosis, and he went mad. He blew off, and he said, I'm sick of everybody thinking I'm mad, and again, I can't remember what he said, but one of his good friends had basically said something, I'm really worried about you, all these psychedelics that you're taking. You're not in the real world. I was like, it's not gifted. Anybody can see beyond the veil and have visions taking psychedelics. And it's one of the reasons, it's actually the main reason why I stopped on my magical journey, because I went on the magical journey because of my own experiences of things moving, hearing things. Again, I don't need to talk about all of them, but I've had those experiences. But when I was doing the magic course, it was all about visualization. And I actually asked my mentor this. I was like, if you're just visualizing something, how do you know it's actually real? And if I can't clarify that something's real versus something that's in my head, I don't want to be involved with it, because I want to know categorically what I am experiencing is real and it's not a manifestation of my own visualization. So that's one of the main reasons why I stopped doing the magic. So this is where it gets really ugly for me, and where I realised how dangerous spiritual psychosis is. So I hadn't spoken to him for a few months, and he made contact with me, asked how I was doing. I said, I'm doing great, thank you very much. Very small talk. He'd gone back to his country of origin, so he basically left China, and he went, I'm over it all, I'm done with it all. And I went, that's where I'm at, I'm kind of done with the whole spiritual nonsense. Anyway, a few weeks later after that, he messaged me and said, can we talk? And I said, yeah, fine. And this is where it really got really ugly. So I've actually written it down because I wanted to understand spiritual psychosis further within the masculine and the feminine perspective. And again, you'll understand why in a minute. So I wrote this in ChatGPT. So I asked it to write me an essay where a man is suffering spiritual psychosis and believes that his divine masculinity is being threatened. He believes that it's okay for him to force himself onto a woman because she wants it. When he sees fear in her eyes, it turns him on. He believes that as a divine masculine man, he is dangerous, and as a divine spiritual being, he is being true to who he start again, who he is as spirit. Anyone who claims to be a victim is not stepping into their divine power. Now, what had happened throughout this conversation was he said, I've been kicked out of the house because my stepmom won't accept me for who I've become, which is stepping into my divine masculine. And the divine masculine is dangerous. So I said, what do you mean by dangerous? So he said, well, if you think of a sword, it's not dangerous unless it's being used in the way that a sword should be used. And again, he was using these metaphors that I can't remember the exact thing. So I said, what makes you think, people are seeing you as dangerous? I needed help understanding what he was saying. So he said, well, he's been on the dating sites and he's met a few people, he's been very true. He doesn't want monogamy and he's married and etc., etc. And he'd been on a date with a woman and he knew she wanted it, and he didn't go into too much detail, but a step had led to another step had led to another step, and, you can use your imagination. But now she's backflipped and she's now saying that she didn't consent. So I said, is she accusing you of RAPE? I'm not sure if you're allowed to say it on YouTube. And he said, not exactly. So I've been in this situation twice where a man has tried to force himself on me and threatened me. One in particular, he put his hand around my throat. And it was pretty scary. So when I brought this up with him, he said, well, if you believe that if you get raped, then you're a victim, then you're not stepping into your divine power. So I said, what the fuck are you talking about? So I said, you're telling me that if I'm walking through a forest and a man attacks me, I ask for that. Basically, yes, because that's what my energy is giving off. He read her energy and she wanted it. He said, imagine walking through a jungle and a lion pounces on you or a tiger pounces on you. You want it. And I'm like, no. And by this point, I was getting really triggered by this. Bearing in mind, I've experienced this scenario. And no, I didn't want it, nor did I ask for it. And if it had gone as far as those guys wanted it to go, yes, I would have been a victim. So he couldn't differentiate between choosing to take a medication and being harmed by that medication and being sexually assaulted by somebody. He basically was trying to make me understand or accept that if you take a medication and you're harmed by that medication, you can't call yourself a victim. And again, you can call yourself a victim because there is the black magic, the manipulation that goes on to get you to take that medication. But that's another story, right? So he kept bringing up Bill Gates because of course, all of this nonsense has pretty much started around 2020 and everything that's gone on beyond that. But anyway, so he said to me, so you're basically saying you're a victim if you get attacked? And I'm saying yes. So then he kept going back to, well, are they victims who take the medication and get injured from that medication? I'm like, well, no, they're not, because they made a choice. They made that choice to take whatever they took and it injured them. If I get attacked, I never made that choice. And he's like, you did, you chose it, your soul chose it. And again, this is where it all gets distorted, right? Because I know of a woman who believes that she was sexually assaulted as a child because that's her karmic path. She's come back and whatever she did in a past life, that happened to her because of what happened in a past life. And this is where spirituality becomes really dangerous. But in this case, I'll continue reading what I wrote. So he couldn't differentiate between choosing to take medication and being harmed and choosing to be sexually assaulted as energetically we want it. Because of our ancient history and the sexual liberation one experienced pre-Abrahamic times, that is how we should be living in today's world. And we have been programmed to not want bestiality and other acts that may be deemed immoral in today's society. It's a distortion and a weakening of the divine masculine and feminine. Women hate men and vice versa. We are not stepping into our divine nature and accepting our roles as men and women, subservient and dominant. Now, bear in mind, this is his belief, and it's actually a lot of, shall we say, alpha male's belief. He used NLP, pattern interrupt, to disrupt my flow and twist my perspective on things, claiming that because I would not accept that a man forcing himself on me, I accepted being a victim. Therefore, I was not spiritually aligned nor stepping into my divine self. By that point, he'd gotten really angry, said something along the lines of, "So you're a victim, Joe. I'm going to delete you and block you." And I said, right, and we hung up. As it happens, he didn't block me, so I blocked him. He did delete all the messages, but I blocked him. Good fucking riddance. So I wanted to understand spiritual psychosis, and I recognise this video's gone on very long, so if you've got this far, thank you. So I wanted to understand spiritual psychosis in its entirety. And again, I'm probably not going to read all of it. Spiritual psychosis and the illusion of divine power. One of the hallmarks of spiritual psychosis is grandiosity, where an individual believes they have divine authority or insight that sets them apart from others. This can lead to an inflated sense of self-importance and a belief that one's actions are justified by a higher purpose. In extreme cases, this can translate into the idea that societal norms and moral boundaries are mere illusions designed to suppress one's true spiritual self. For example, some individuals suffering from spiritual psychosis may believe that traditional moral standards, such as the prohibition of violence or sexual boundaries, are artificial constructs imposed by religious or societal institutions. They may argue that before the influence of organised religion, humanity lived in a state of sexual and social liberation, and that returning to this state is necessary for spiritual enlightenment. This belief can lead to dangerous behaviours, where an individual feels justified in violating the consent and autonomy of others under the guise of fulfilling a divine mission. And that's what I kept saying to him regarding taking certain medication versus being sexually assaulted. That person has autonomy of their body. They can do what they like. The person who chooses to assault someone else is actually violating that other individual's autonomy of their own body. So the misinterpretation of masculinity and femininity. Another common distortion within spiritual psychosis is the rigid belief in divine masculinity and femininity, where gender roles are seen as absolute and unchangeable. A person suffering from this delusion may believe that men must be dominant and aggressive, while women must be submissive and obedient. When taken to the extreme, this ideology can justify acts of control, coercion, and violence under the premise that they align with spiritual law. This belief system can be further reinforced through manipulative psychological techniques, such as neuro-linguistic programming and pattern interruption, which are used to distort another person's perception of reality. An individual using these techniques may claim that resistance to control or domination is merely a sign of spiritual weakness or misalignment. This gaslighting tactic can leave victims doubting their own experiences and struggling to maintain a sense of autonomy. Moral relativism and the justification of harm. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of spiritual psychosis is the erosion of ethical boundaries. Some individuals may argue that concepts of morality are entirely subjective and that societal taboos, such as prohibitions against non-consensual acts or bestiality, are mere illusions created to suppress human nature. This line of thinking not only disregards the fundamental principles of consent and personal agency, but also endangers vulnerable individuals who may be coerced into harmful situations under the pretense of spiritual enlightenment. Moreover, this belief that suffering or victimization is merely an illusion can be particularly harmful. In this view, those who claim to be victims are seen as failing to embrace their true spiritual nature. This dismissive attitude invalidates the real pain and trauma that individuals experience and places the blame on victims rather than perpetrators or karmic past life karma. And bearing in mind, before all of this, I was actually considering going to China. I was trying to get people to look after my animals and run my business for me so I could go meet this guy, because he invited me to go to China. But of course, after the boundary overstepping, I was like, nah, too predatory for my sexual preferences. Thank you very much. So to conclude, the importance of grounded spirituality. While spirituality can be a transformative force of good, it is crucial to approach it with discernment and self-awareness. A grounded spiritual practice acknowledges ethical boundaries, personal agency, and the importance of mutual respect. True spiritual growth does not involve domination or coercion, but rather a deep understanding of oneself and a compassionate connection with others. Yeah, it's this whole divine masculine, divine feminine. I've seen it a few times now in the spiritual community where the divine masculine feels like it can have multiple partners, where the divine feminine sits at home and just accepts all of this, like the weak woman that she is. And of course, we've got the alpha male crap that's pushed by the likes of Andrew Tate. And then you've got the movement of trad wives, which are traditional wives, which is the woman staying home and baking. And I've been seeing it in certain not even spiritual communities, just in communities in general. So yes, there is a definite distortion going on within reality itself. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.